Hi there, and welcome to Power Play. I'm Vashi Kapelos in Ottawa on this Thursday. Tonight, here it comes, the first budget confidence vote.
With this budget, Canadians are paying champagne prices for tap water results.
This budget is about building this great country.
A test of confidence in the House of Commons this hour as MPs vote on opposition amendments to the government's motion for budget support. In moments, we're going to speak with Housing and Infrastructure Minister Gregor Robertson. Then, we set aside budget politics and dig into the policy.
Our diagnosis of what's been holding the economy back is very similar to what's in the budget.
Much of Prime Minister Mark Carney's fiscal plan hinges on attracting business investment. Will it work? Former Bank of Canada Governor Stephen Poloz will be here live, and I'm going to ask him. Plus, floor crosser fallout.
It's a great addition to our caucus, and it's also a reflection when I say this is a budget that is for Canadians.
Liberals are up a seat at the Conservatives' expense. Are there more to come? Our front bench is set to dig into the long-term consequences of floor crossing with Christy Clark, Marco Mendicino, James Moore, and Tony Clement. They will all be here a little bit later on in the show. First, though.
Mr. Champagne, how confident are you you'll get the votes to pass your budget?
Well, you know, I was on the road, and Canadian wants to see this budget going forward. I mean, trust me, come in the airport with me. People were stopping me around the line, say, go, we need this budget to go forward, because, you know, it's an investment budget, but it's a budget made for Canadians. And that's what I would invite any member of the opposition, go in the street, talk to people. So I think this is a vote for Canadians.
This hour, the government is up against its first test of House confidence on the federal budget. We'll take you live inside the House of Commons right now, where a little bit later this hour, MPs are set to vote on a Conservative sub-amendment to the government's motion for budget support. In plain language, that means the Tories are pitching some changes to the budget, like a much smaller deficit. That vote, like I said, is expected a little bit later this hour, and we will carry it live for you as it happens. Here's how the debate played out over the day.
Every dollar that the Prime Minister spends costs Canadians in higher taxes, higher inflation, and more expensive debt. With this budget, Canadians are paying champagne prices for tap water results. So why is he asking them to pay more?
With the $1 trillion of investment that we are going to catalyze, we are going to put more than $3,000 in the pocket of every Canadian by the end of this decade.
They're not investing in the next generation. They're borrowing from it. This Prime Minister is on track to be the most expensive in Canada's history.
This budget has the lowest net debt to GDP in the G7. It has the lowest deficit projected, and the cost of interest borrowing is lower than when the Conservatives were in government.
Now, I don't want to prejudge the outcome of that vote, but there is a bit of a spoiler alert. We are not expecting the government to fall following the confidence vote this evening, at least this one. The NDP has already come out against the Conservatives' amendment. Take a listen.
Well, we're not supporting it.
What
we'll be voting
What
against
about
it.
the last one?
We're still studying that motion, but the one today we're definitely voting against. It would cause the Conservatives want, massive cuts to public spending. That's exactly the opposite direction that New Democrats think we need to go in, which is investing in Canadian economy at this point. So there's absolutely no way we're going to support the Conservative motion today.
For more on this and the content of the budget, Gregor Robertson is here. He's the Minister of Housing and Infrastructure. Minister, a pleasure to welcome you. Thanks for making the time.
Good to be with you.
It sounds like from what we heard from Mr. Davies, your government is safe another night this evening. But I do want to ask more broadly. The budget itself will face a confidence vote. Have you secured enough votes to pass your budget?
Well, that result will be known when the vote happens. We're obviously very confident in our team, and the Canadians want to see a government that's investing in Canada. We want to come through this budget strong and be able to roll out all of this investment, particularly for me in housing and infrastructure. It's an unprecedented level of investment. We are very hopeful that we'll see support from other members in the other parties. They've got to make that decision for themselves, but certainly we're going to bring that forward confidently, and we know Canadians support that.
I have a number of questions on what this budget does and doesn't do for housing in a moment. But I wanted to ask you, because I have spoken to leaders or members of all the different parties, and in particular where the NDP and Bloc are concerned, both have expressed the sentiment from their perspective that your government did very little to consult or include their ideas in this budget. Why is it that your government acted more like a majority introducing this budget than a minority, which it actually is?
If you look at the budget the way that it's put together right now, and I'll speak from my perspective as Housing and Infrastructure Ministry, we have investments that are huge scale in ridings right across the country, in communities, cities, towns across Canada. Doesn't matter if it's a red seat or a blue seat or an orange seat or a green seat, we are investing in all of Canada. This is a critical time for our country, and we're recognizing that we have to invest in all of Canada, lifting all of Canada, creating the jobs, creating the housing, the affordable housing that we need, and going full tilt on major projects that create jobs across Canada in every part of the country right now. So I think when we look at what other members in Parliament want to see, they want to see investment in their communities, and that's what we're doing with this budget.
But why, with great respect, Minister, are you speaking for them? Like, they felt there was a lack of consultation on this budget. Was your party just assuming enough people would cross the floor that you didn't need to consult with opposition?
Well, we're in a situation now where we're going to debate the budget. So they have the opportunity to move amendments. There was an enormous amount of engagement with Canadians through the summer and fall that was done to hear from Canadians. What do they want to see in the budget? We obviously put forward a platform last spring and were elected. 169 of us were elected with a mandate to deliver at a critical time for Canada right now, to invest in affordable housing, to make sure we're working in partnership with Indigenous people across Canada, to make sure that we're focused on our strengths in Canada when the world is in a very unsettled place right now and our relationship with the U.S. is tough. We are delivering a budget that responds to what people told us during the election, what people told us all summer and all fall. And members of Parliament have an opportunity to debate that and move amendments now as we go into the budget votes.
I'm glad, Minister, that you brought up the platform, because it's against your party's platform that the backdrop of that platform that I want to ask you about your file and what is and what isn't in this budget. Your government billed this budget as transformative. The finance minister called it 25 times in his budget speech generational. But on your file specifically, it appears to be anything but. Two examples, the centerpiece of your housing policy, and I lean on analysis here from Mike Moffat. The new agency that you created gets only about half the money allocated that you promised it would during the campaign. A second example, you've watered down incentivizing the reduction of development fees. In the platform in the campaign, you said there would be a requirement that development charges be halved, and the budget simply says substantially reduce. What is transformative, Minister, about any of that?
Well, first of all, transformative in terms of scale. I mean, right now, in this budget, there's $13 billion that's dedicated to affordable housing, which is unprecedented in a single budget. And obviously, there are future budgets that can follow up on that work. Build Canada Homes is the biggest single investment in non-market housing, affordable housing for Canadians that we've ever seen. And we are rolling that work out with purpose right now. With development charges, that's basically, as a former mayor, you invest those development charges into infrastructure in the cities and towns to build housing, to make sure you've got the water and the wastewater and the roads and public transit. $51 billion is dedicated here in this budget alone into that infrastructure, which is remarkable. It's a lot to move forward with and invest. I'm very confident in our ability to do that. Those are huge investments. Actually, the infrastructure investment goes far beyond what the development charge commitment in the platform looked at. So we're respecting that local communities need to invest in that infrastructure to build the housing and make our communities better with community centers and schools and hospitals. We're taking that step with this budget. And, we expect other members of Parliament to support that if they want to see investment in Canada at this scale.
Minister, with respect, I do have to push back on the idea that those development charges are warranted. The issue with the previous government, which was also a Liberal government, was that they put out this pot of money for either infrastructure or housing to municipalities and loosely said this will incentivize a decrease in development fees. If development fees stay where they are, then that disincentivizes an increase in supply. That has been advocated to your government loud and clear. Why did you water down the language? And why tonight are you saying, hey, those development fees are all for a good cause?
No, what we're saying and what we're doing is we are investing in the infrastructure in a partnership. And we require the provinces, the territories, the cities to reduce their development charges to get that funding. So basically, it's reducing or eliminating the development charges in many cases and getting the investment directly into the infrastructure, which is what they would use that for. So we're seeing a much greater amount invested in housing and community infrastructure than there was in development charges. So we're going beyond what was committed in the platform in this budget, and we're making sure that it's driving directly at infrastructure, that the community centers, the water, the public transit that our communities need, and the jobs that it creates to create that infrastructure.
Are you saying that it's because of the potential use of those in infrastructure that you watered down the language from where it was in the platform? Because I, again, have to point out to you, Minister, and our audience, that your platform specified the development charges would be halved. The incentive would be to have them. The language in the budget simply just says substantially reduced. That is a germane difference.
Well, we don't know exactly how much it'll be reduced in each jurisdiction. So if they want the infrastructure investment
up to you?
That we're putting on the table, if we put the infrastructure investment forward, they have to reduce their development charges. So the uptake is going to be up to those communities. If they want infrastructure investment, it's there for them. They got to reduce their development costs and bring down the cost of building the housing. So we're making the investment. We're making actually more dollars available than that 50% reduction would suggest.
But what's the expectation? To be clear tonight, for municipalities and their leaders watching this evening, what is the expectation in order to receive that giant pot of money that you explained for infrastructure? What is the expectation that they lower their development fees? Like, by how much?
By the dollars that are invested in the infrastructure. It's basically development cost charges goes to housing infrastructure, community infrastructure. That's where almost every city and town is investing it. That's why they raise those funds. We're investing those funds in partnership. We want to see those development costs go down as a result of that. So we'll be tracking that. They have to be accountable for reducing those housing costs to get the infrastructure dollars. And there's a lot, it's $51 billion that are available overall in the infrastructure investment, which is massive, and it's going to make a huge difference in many communities. It'll actually accelerate the amount of investment, the community centers, the public transit, the housing that can be enabled with that infrastructure. We're going to see that accelerate because of a greater investment than anticipated.
I just want to circle back before I let you go, Minister, to the initial point around the agency, because that was kind of the marquee piece of your announcement a number of weeks ago, and I think what remained in the budget, because there isn't anything additional. Once again, I do want to put to you that what you committed to in the platform is $11.2 billion. What is in the budget is a 40% reduction from that at $6.8 billion. I know you characterize it as this, again, generational investment, even in this interview. Why is it so substantially reduced? Do you intend to use it less than you were promising Canadians you would?
No, not at all. There's a $13 billion investment in Build Canada Homes in this budget. And that is to focus on homelessness and supportive transitional housing to help people off the streets and out of shelters. There's $1 billion for that. There's $1.5 billion that's dedicated to rental protection and making sure we're protecting affordable rental buildings. And there's north of $10 billion that is going to be invested in affordable housing, co-ops, lower rent and missing middle housing for workforce, for young people, student housing. We want to see a massive scale of investment, and this is in this budget. We're going to see in future budgets, we'll continue the pace in terms of investing in affordable housing. We're setting up the one-stop shop with Build Canada Homes, and we're going to invest in affordable housing at an unprecedented scale.
Just to be clear, am I completely reading something wrong? Because when I look at the line in the budget for Build Canada Homes, it is $6.8 billion on an accrual basis versus $11.2 that you promised in the platform. Are you putting together other things to come up with that number? Because it's not evident in the budget.
Well, it depends if you're looking at it as an accrual basis or a cash basis. So it's different how it's reflected in the budget. The overall commitment in this coming year is $13 billion for affordable housing. So that's what Build Canada Homes is working from. And we're looking at partnerships with the private sector, with provinces, territories, cities and towns, Indigenous nations. We want to see that leveraged so we get a multiple of that invested into housing.
Okay, I'm going to leave it on that note. Appreciate your time as always, Minister. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vashi.
Thanks. Gregor Robertson is the Minister of Housing and Infrastructure. We've got a lot to talk about when it comes to the budget. Our front bench is set to do that a little bit later on this hour. Christy Clark, Marco Mendicino, James Moore, and Tony Clement will all be here. First, though, after a short commercial break, budget math. How does the banker's budget stack up in the eyes of economists? Former Bank of Canada Governor Stephen Poloz will join me next, live in studio. Stay right there.
Our diagnosis of what's been holding the economy back is very similar to what's in the budget. There's been a lack of business investment. If we want to grow the economy more, we need more investment. We need to improve our productivity. We need to improve our competitiveness. This budget, I think there is a significant change in this budget.
Some words of support from Bank of Canada Governor Tiff Macklem after Prime Minister Mark Carney unveiled his first federal spending blueprint. The broad strokes, the feds are spending big with $141 billion in new measures over 5 years, projecting to find those savings of $51 billion over the same period, and promise that those plans will spur $1 trillion of economic growth. But it is all coming at a significant cost. A $78 billion deficit this year, still projected to be at $56 billion by 2029-2030. Former Bank of Canada Governor Stephen Poloz is here live in studio with me to offer his analysis this hour. It's nice to see you, Mr. Poloz.
Great to be here.
Thank you very much for making the time.
Yeah.
The last time we spoke, I believe, if I remember correctly, I asked you, what does the government need to do to address what you view as the biggest issue around investment vis-a-vis the trade war? And you said, create the conditions for that investment on the private side of things to catalyze. Do you think this budget accomplished that?
In broad strokes, yes. It's all the right ideas. What we have to see is how you go about executing those ideas. But in broad brush, it's exactly right. The emphasis is on providing more fishing rods, not fish. In other words, not consumption, but let's grow through fundamental investment. And everything that's pictured there is driven by private sector involvement. Even the big infrastructure stuff, I believe, is going to be all partnered. So there's that catalytic notion that the Prime Minister has talked a lot about. Means that you're thinking of designing things, these are the details we need to see, that will draw in the private money and at good returns, and everybody will want to. And that's a very big shift in emphasis.
If you could expand on that shift, when you say fish and fishing rods, how would you delineate the types of budgets we had seen versus this type of budget?
Yeah, so I'm trying to distinguish between what we call transfers to persons or transfers, let's say, to provinces, which can end up being, the same thing, versus using those resources, which, are more scarce each year, using those precious resources to spontaneously create more economic growth. That's usually not an investment just by the government, but it's where the government may de-risk something or bring capacity to a position that then joins with private money to create something bigger. And importantly, all the talk about deficits and the debt ratio and so on in the budget is all kind of like a baseline set of assumptions. and it's based on an economic outlook, which everybody had as a consensus this past summer. So if the budget does succeed in the things that it's trying to achieve, then that whole forecast becomes irrelevant. The economy will be stronger, tax revenues will be stronger, deficits will be smaller, debt levels will be lower. All those things is what we would expect, but you can't assume those things in a budget, and they could be very profound.
Well, because I imagine the opposite could be true as well.
Well, the opposite would mean that if they did nothing, the economy would be what it is today, or if they just transferred the money to people and they spent it on vacations or just, feeding themselves, et cetera, then that would not have that growth type of multiplier or productivity benefits in general. And so we never assume those things in a budget because that would be a little bit unfair. It would make the budget look too rosy, and then everybody would be tackling the assumptions as opposed to tackling, are these the right policies in the context?
So some of the policies that you mentioned and that are aimed at catalyzing private investment, essentially, and increasing productivity. In broad strokes, we've seen them before. A couple of times, multiple times under Stephen Harper, once under Justin Trudeau. But essentially, this idea that you can write off your investments into your own business much easier and to a greater degree.
Yes.
Is there any difference in any assumptions we can have about the degree to which that will work or not? Because now we are up against not just regular sets of challenges, but the challenge of the United States,
yes.
Very directly saying, we're going to do X, Y, and Z to get that investment out of Canada to the United States.
So that's a very important point. So none of us knows the answer to that. So I'll just walk us through that. If you're sitting there as a company, you're considering expanding your company, and you believe the rate of return on that expansion would be some number. Today, it looks like a riskier proposition than it looked like 6 months ago, let's say, or more, I guess I should say 12 months ago. And so, the management and the board are like, I'm not sure we want to make that investment. It looks too risky. We need a higher rate of return to compensate for the risk. Along comes the government with an accelerated depreciation schedule, which means, after tax, it's coming in faster for us. Is that enough to overcome that risk premium? And that answer, we don't know. Of course, at the same time, the government is working hard to try and negotiate that risk down. That's an issue. And of course, find other ways, such as diversifying trade, reduce that risk, et cetera. So these things all must figure into those kind of strategic decisions at companies, and we can't predict or be certain that those things are going to pay off in the way we imagine they would.
Do you have an instinct as to whether the scale of what is proposed matches the potential threat from that? Like, do you have any instinct at this point? Or is it just very difficult because we are so uncertain as to whether there will be any trade resolve?
Yeah, I'm not sure that's really quantifiable, Vashi. Right. It would certainly vary from company to company, how exposed you are to the trade risk and so on. So I wouldn't want to hazard that. Anyway, I would say that's the relatively small part of this thing. The big part is the large funding, which is going through that stream through major projects. Those are the big bite-sized pieces that the government would have a role in bringing both financial capacity to a consortium of private sector participants, as well as de-risking the project through the regulatory processes. So that sort of duality of role is what's going to make that thing happen. And those are things that can only happen in Canada. A company may have a choice between expanding itself in Canada or hedging itself by expanding in the United States. The company's been doing that since Donald Trump's first term. We know all that. But if it's an infrastructure project here in Canada that will facilitate economic growth here in Canada, well, it's only going to happen here in Canada. And so the benefits there definitely are going to be conveyed to the entire economy.
I'm running out of time, but I did want to ask you, you mentioned the Major Projects Office.
Yes.
And the energy sector is very interested in, obviously, how that will work. They had identified, for a long time now, things that they feel as policies of the previous government, and most of which have remained as major impediments to their ability to increase, to develop or either increase production, a whole host of different things. I'm thinking of the tanker ban, of the emissions cap, of the process underway with C-69. I know the government says that C5 on an ad hoc basis might be able to get around those things. And they've also sort of hinted in the budget that the emissions cap could go, but it sounds like the industrial carbon price would increase, in order to trigger that. There was no clarity yesterday that the Prime Minister offered on that.
Right.
What is your view on the level of certainty required by the sector to actually become a quote-unquote energy superpower?
Well, higher than today, that's for sure. And I guess in this sense, that for that whole, what I call the walk and chew gum at the same time idea, which is we can be in a conventional energy superpower plus a green energy superpower, because we need all of everything in the world. So can we do that? I think the answer is yes, but what we're looking at is what ingredients can they bring to the table? And if it's case by case, in the case of a project which is in the national interest, then that's all well and good, but you're going to need some advanced certainty, project by project, I think, as opposed to changing the fundamental policies, which didn't happen. So in that sense, the budget wasn't as seismic as people may have been hoping. And yet the door is open there. And I'd say walk and chew gum at the same time to me means pressing ahead and really achieving pathways, for instance, showing that you can chew gum so that you can do more expansion in the conventional energy space.
I will leave it on that note. Mr. Polas, appreciate your analysis as always. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Former Bank of Canada Governor Stephen Polas. That's the policy breakdown. We're going to turn back to budget politics on the other end of a short break here on Power Play. Our front bench is coming up. Christy Clark, Marco Mendicino, James Moore, and Tony Clement. There they are. They're back with me in 2 minutes.
Every dollar that the Prime Minister spends costs Canadians in higher taxes, higher inflation, and more expensive debt. With this budget, Canadians are paying champagne prices for tap water results. So why is he asking them to pay more?
With the $1 trillion of investment that we are going to catalyze, we are going to put more than $3,000 in the pocket of every Canadian by the end of this decade.
They're not investing in the next generation. They're borrowing from it. This Prime Minister is on track to be the most expensive in Canada's history.
This budget has the lowest net debt to GDP in the G7. It has the lowest deficit projected, and the cost of interest borrowing is lower than when the Conservatives were in government.
It is the Carney government's first big test with two possible results. Either they can pass their newly released budget with opposition support in the minority House, or they get voted down on a budget confidence vote. They're expected to face their first confidence vote related to the budget. That's going to happen a little bit later this hour. It's actually on an amendment proposed by an opposition party, but the NDP is expected to support the government on that, so we don't anticipate the government will fall. But they are going to have to get support in order to pass the budget itself. So will they be able to? Let's bring in our front bench to talk about that. Former BC Premier Christy Clark is here. She's a senior advisor with Bennett Jones now. Marco Mendicino is former chief of staff to Prime Minister Mark Carney and a former Liberal cabinet minister. CTV political analyst and former Conservative industry minister James Moore is with us. He's now a policy advisor at Edelman. And rounding us out this evening, Tony Clement served in senior roles in Conservative Prime Minister Stephen Harper's cabinet. He's now CEO of Tony Clement International. Hi, everybody. Nice to see you. Christy, I'll start with you. Do you think they're going to have any issue getting the budget across the finish line? And what do you think it did or didn't do for this government?
Well, at the moment, it looks like it's going to get across the finish line. I mean, I was just in Ottawa yesterday, and as I'm sure you've heard, Vashi, everybody in the Liberals is talking about 2 more coming over from the Conservatives. I think that might be wishful thinking, but you never know. The other thing that's unpredictable is poor old Don Davies, who I think is a prince of a guy, is managing this kooky caucus. And I don't think anybody can lay reasonable bets on what they're all going to do at the end of the day. But I think in general, yes, I think the budget will pass. I'm not sure that people see a whole lot of interest. I mean, most parties don't see a whole lot of interest in another election happening right away. And whoever triggers it, I think will bear some blame for that. Nobody wants a Christmas election, I don't think. And I think most Canadians do sort of want to see Mark Carney get his chance here and see, even if it doesn't, even if they're not prepared to give him a full 4 years, I don't know. I think they will want to give him a better chance than he's had so far to make some of the plans that he's put together work.
James, as the budget was being released, we were together on air. It's been a few days since then. As you look at sort of how it was billed versus what was delivered, what is your assessment?
Well, it was overhyped and under-delivered, but it doesn't mean that there aren't some significant things in the budget that are meaningful to the economy. I mean, on the positive side, look at military spending. $81 billion in new spending on the military, which has sort of two benefits to it. On the high level, it provides the government of Canada, broadly speaking, all Canadians, to be seen to be getting closer to our NATO commitment of 3 to 5% now of GDP towards military spending, and that's good. But on the other hand, if they do procurement in such a way that will actually allow Canada to create more independence from our reliance and full alignment with the United States entirely on military spending, it creates some real benefit for Canada in actually exercising a little bit of independence and choice in how we want to move forward. Now, a quarter of that money goes to retention and salaries within the military, but I think that military spending money of $81 billion is a significant, really important part of this budget in terms of Canadian independence. The other new spending on, localized infrastructure projects, national infrastructure projects, we'll have to wait and see the timeline of how that money is going to be meted out and see what kind of economic benefits we get from that. But, overall, the budget, I mean, it doesn't deserve a failing grade. It doesn't deserve an A+. It probably deserves a C or a C+, but it was certainly overhyped relative to what we're getting. And I think the biggest failing on this is actually on the political side. And then in that, there were no sort of populist measures in there, no sort of tangible things that people can feel immediately, like a reduction in the GST or a tax credit or a child tax benefit or something in the window that is on a retail political basis that people can feel immediately upon the budget's passage. So I think that was probably the political misstep of the budget, if there was one.
Marco, do you think that's by design? And I listen to a lot of the questioning of the government on that, and often you'll hear the Prime Minister or others say, but the tax cut that we did, based on the campaign when we first came into office, or the consumer carbon tax, we cut that, like referencing older actions to kind of, pose it against or posit against the fact that none of that exists in a new way in this budget. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think you could be right, and it is not an unusual device for the government to come back to tangible tax breaks. For example, the first thing that the government did, as we all know, is provide a tax break for 22 million Canadians. But I think, to come back to your central question, that the budget is likely to pass for a number of reasons. One, to quote Stephen Pelosi, who you just had on, it's got all the right ideas. It strikes the balance between showing restraint, which is something that I hear about among industry leaders. It shows, to quote the clip that you had from Tiff Macklem, the current governor, transformational investments around important priorities, including, as James just said, around defense spending, which will strengthen our sovereignty and our security. And I think, just to come back full circle to the premise of your question to me, that the Prime Minister transmits a tone of seriousness, that this is serious work, that there's a lot of turmoil, there's a lot of noise that is going on in the world, in the chamber, but he's focused. And so as long as he transmits that he's doing serious work, that the government is doing serious work with steady hands, then yeah, I think this budget is likely to pass.
Tony, what do you think? We know the Conservatives won't support it. Do you anticipate that, and I should point out that the NDP has definitely not shut the door to supporting it, so that tells us something. They haven't said that they will for sure, but they've also left open the door to abstention.
Yeah, it's hard to contemplate the budget not passing. Stranger things have happened in Canadian politics, so you never say never. But I think it is also appropriate for the Conservative Party to vote against the budget. I think that the constituency that voted Conservative in the last election was really focused on cost of living issues, on the cost of housing, on the cost of groceries, on just how tough it is to live in Canada right now. And it ain't getting any better, folks. So I think that constituency that did vote Conservative in the last election does deserve a voice in Parliament. And that's exactly what the Conservatives are giving them. And, they'll they'll live to fight another day on other issues and perhaps another budget if this one passes. But that debate is ongoing. Let's face it. There was a debate about who can best stand up to Donald Trump, and that debate evidently was won by Mark Carney in the last election. But there was another large group of people, younger people, millennials, etc., who felt that cost of living and just how are we going to survive in this country if everything is just so darn expensive, they deserve a voice in this parliament as well.
That actually reminds me of something about this budget, Christy, that I wanted to ask you as someone who has, presided over the introduction of a number of budgets. The primary pitch of the budget or premise is that the stuff we're doing will create economic growth in the mid to long term and have a material impact on your life then when your wages are raised, the society's more productive, et cetera, et cetera. That doesn't do anything for the cohort of people that Tony just spoke about, right? Who are feeling very anguished right now about their own economic fortunes or lack thereof. I wonder, do you think it's a communications challenge for the government to try and make this budget land with Canadians when the primary pitch is so far down the road?
Yeah, I don't know how far down the road it is. I mean, when you're talking about a budget that's intended to stimulate quickly economic growth, purchasing, the productivity deduction, for example, businesses purchasing, manufacturing and other kinds of a break on those kinds of real estate. I think what you could see, and if the government is making big investments in clearing land to build more homes, they're getting out there and building more ports and those kinds of things, you might see big job spin-offs from that quite quickly. It's not impossible. That's what we saw in British Columbia when we made investments in infrastructure. Governments can put a lot of people to work reasonably quickly by making the investments that they are in kind of public infrastructure. And this is an infrastructure budget, I think, unlike anything we've probably seen since Mr. Chrétien. So, or maybe James would argue with that because he was infrastructure minister under Stephen Harper. But this will create a lot of jobs just in the process of getting there. I was surprised, though, to kind of note the dissonance between the Prime Minister saying, well, we're going to have lots of sacrifices. It's going to be hard for the next generation. And then in this budget, there wasn't a whole lot of explanation about why it's going to be hard and how it's going to get better. But I presume they're going to be working hard to answer that question in the coming weeks and months. They need to.
I've just got about 30 seconds left. Last word to you on this subject, James.
Yeah, a lot of these are macroeconomic solutions for a micro retail economic challenges. The politics of it are retail anxieties of people's everyday life and cost pressures, and the solutions that are in the budget are more macro. Hopefully, look, from Christie's mouth to God's ears, hopefully it does result in the kind of job spin-offs and economic growth that will sort of draw down into the benefits of everyday Canadians. But there's nothing really sort of tangible that's immediate of benefit to everyday Canadians. And I think that's where Conservatives see their opportunity.
We'll take a quick commercial break and we'll dive into the floor crossing spectacle, I guess you could call it, that Christy referenced after that break. Stay right there. More Front Bench ahead. Welcome back to Power Play. We have some breaking news to report to you. Just delivered into my inbox. Matt Genereux, who is an MP that represents a riding in Edmonton, the riding of Edmonton-Riverbend, has just announced that he is resigning as a member of Parliament. This is very significant politically because yesterday, when there was more discussion about who else from the Conservative Party would be leaving the Conservatives to move to the Liberals, the most speculated name was Matt Genereux, so much so that he released a one-line statement yesterday afternoon through his office saying that he would not be leaving the Conservative Party. He is now announcing that he is resigning altogether as a member of Parliament. I'm going to read to you word for word the statement. For those who have reached out, I am deeply grateful for your friendship and concern. However, I ask that you please not attempt to contact my family during this time. I ran in the last election hopeful that Canadians would put their faith in a team led by Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives, offering a chance to change Canada's perception in our own country and around the world. I wanted desperately to play a role in that vision. Although the outcome was not what I anticipated, I have great admiration for the many remarkable individuals who were elected to the House of Commons on both sides of the aisle, who continue to dedicate themselves to the betterment of our nation. Their work gives me faith that the momentum toward a stronger and more unified Canada endures. With all of this in mind, earlier today I spoke with our opposition whip, a colleague and friend for whom I have the utmost respect, to inform him of my decision to resign as a member of Parliament. It was not an easy decision, but it is, I believe, the right one. I hope to have the opportunity to address the House one final time in the future. For now, my focus must turn entirely to my family and to the responsibilities that come with that. So the breaking news on our watch this hour, Matt Jeneroux, an MP who was widely speculated to be among those considering to cross the floor from the Conservatives to the Liberals, has announced instead, a day after denying that that would be the case, that he is resigning as an MP. The front bench happens to be here as this news comes into our inbox. I'm here with Christy Clark, Marco Mendicino, James Moore, and Tony Clement. Sorry to throw you guys this curveball, but I do have to get your reaction. James, I'll start with you. What does this say to you?
There's more to this. I don't know exactly what there is, but on the surface, he was just elected 6 months ago. So I don't know. But I would say this about Matt. He's a friend of mine. I've known him for years. He's a good man. He's a smart guy. He's a good guy. He was just reelected in his riding. He served, multiple terms for his riding in Edmonton. His wife works in British Columbia. She's a medical doctor. The tension of going to and from Alberta and Ottawa back and forth while having a family split in another part of the country is not an easy thing to do. So on the surface, I will assume that's why, and that maybe he's seeking another opportunity. But there's more to this than just that. The crunch of the pressure about the rumors about floor crossing and what's going on here. It'd be unfair to speculate about it. But I'll just say to your viewers that Matt Jeneroux is a good guy, a really good guy. This is a loss to the Conservative Party, a loss to his constituents, and it's unfortunate to see him leaving Parliament Hill.
Marco, I think if I remember right, you also know Matt Jeneroux, despite the fact that you were both in different parties. I know for a fact that he was involved in some discussions about crossing the floor, that the reaction from the party yesterday was quite significant, swift and specific to him, so much so that he did put out that statement at the end of the day. What do you think is going on here, and what's your reaction?
Don't know. Would be reluctant to speculate. I'm inclined to agree with James that there may be some other reason. But yeah, Matt was my next door neighbor in Valor Building where I had my last office. And I know Chris D'Entremont, and I think it underscores the human dimension to this. I have some experience with floor crossers. I ran against one for my Liberal nomination. And some of the folks on this panel may recall that. But I certainly wish, Chris D'Entremont a different outcome. Look, I think this gets back to what we were saying in the prior segment, which is that there is a lot of swirl right now. There's a lot of energy on the Hill. And the challenge for the government is, amidst floor crossing and now resignations, how do you get a budget passed? How do you cut through all of that noise? Mm-hmm. And to my mind, I think that one of the Prime Minister's great skills is in managing through this kind of tumult and turmoil. And we all pay attention to these stories. You've got to cover it, Vashi. That's your job. We're commenting on it because we've got experience on it. But frankly, I think what Canadians want to know is how they're going to be able to pay the bills and how they're going to, counter the tariffs at the border and how they're going to go about their daily lives in a Canada that is strong. And so in order to do that, the government has an agenda, has a plan, and that materializes in the form of the budget. So you got to, keep your eyes forward, keep your hands steady on the wheel, and make sure that you keep Canadians at the top of your mind. And the way to do that is to try to get this budget passed as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and I wouldn't want to take away from the seriousness of anything that people are facing, but it is a political show. Yeah. And an MP that was rumored to move parties yesterday just quit, so I apologize. I do have to cover it. Sure. Tony, I wanted to get your read, because like all of you have mentioned, you've been on floor, you've been around floor crossings on both sides of the spectrum, or both sides of the aisle. What does this say to you tonight?
Well, firstly, let me wish Matt well. I knew him as well as James did, and great guy, so I wish him well. Let's not forget that I think I read a stat that there's been over 300 floor crossings since the first Parliament in Canadian history. Yeah. So that's a lot. Some people would say that's a small number. I think it's a big number, actually. So it happens a lot. The most spectacular one in recent memory, of course, was a lady I ran against for leader, Belinda Stronach, crossing the floor, giving Paul Martin
that was a big
one extra vote that he needed to keep going in Parliament. That one extra vote kept him going in Parliament. And then, of course, the next election happened and Stephen Harper was elected as Prime Minister. So I gained some comfort from that little historical memory. And look, it's going to happen. It usually happens, not always, but usually from opposition to government. You know, let's use the time-honored line, the worst day in government is better than the best day in opposition, blah, blah, blah. But it is true. And so I think, again, with what Marco said, there's a lot of heat going on, not a lot of light. But I think that the broader picture is the public policy decisions of the Carney government.
This is, I mean, just the fact that it's definitely not the drama of Belinda Stronach. I think we can all probably agree on that at this moment, Christy. But it is happening at a particularly important time for the government, right? I mean, the reason I think there was such focus, besides the spectacle of it all, was because they're so close to a majority, right?
Yes.
2 days ago, they were 3 seats away. Yesterday became 2 seats away. And everyone is wondering whether they'll be able to secure enough to actually hold a majority, which would be a big difference in the way in which this government is able to conduct their business. What do you make of the fact that this MP in particular decided to quit today, to resign his seat, instead of either stay with the Conservatives or move to the Liberals?
Yeah, there's no doubt that it's consequential. The moment is huge. You're quite right about that. It doesn't, floor crossings sometimes happen, but this is pretty spectacular. And I can tell you my own experience of floor crossings. One of our caucus members left because he wanted to become the speaker, and he sunk the whole government. So there are consequential floor crossings and just regular ones that happen because people might be ambitious. It is really hard to know. It's impossible to know what's going on for him and his family. There could be many, many other more complicated things that we don't see. But I will say, in my experience with these things, and it's been more than one event as a BC Liberal and leading a coalition government for years, that people, when they decide to leave or when they decide to come and they've come from somewhere else, the feeling amongst their once very close friends is brutal, and they're excised. They're treated as traitors. There's lots of angry, harsh words that are exchanged privately between people who were once very close. And I think for some people who may be fresher to politics, that can be a really devastating, personally devastating feeling. You're in a caucus of people, you all trust each other, you've all worked together, you know each other well, and then everybody turns on you and you look around and you say, I thought we were friends. It seems to me that has to have been part of his decision, that after just, all this talk and certainly some evidence that he had been having a discussion about leaving with the Liberals, that there was kind of no going back for him in the Conservatives. There was those friendships, or the ones that he thought he had been irrevocably changed. And perhaps he just decided, you know what? There's no place for me here. Politics isn't the kind of business that I want to be into. I wasn't really made for this kind of event. I didn't really know how it would all unfold, and he just decided to call it quits. Some people do that, and it's proof that politicians are human beings for everybody. The fact that sometimes it's just too hard to carry on. And if that's the case for him, I feel sad for him, but perhaps he's made the right decision for his personal and professional life.
Vashi, important procedural point. If the resignation is effective immediately, I believe it changes the math on the vote.
Yeah,
so,
sure.
I mean, just
sure.
I think it does. That's what I was,
Yeah, we're underanalyzing this a little bit. We're underanalyzing this a little bit.
Right.
Tony Clement he made the point about Belinda Stronach crossing the floor. She didn't give the Liberals the plurality they needed to pass that budget.
That's right.
It was Chuck Cadman, one member of Parliament. So if Matt Jeneroux resigns his seat immediately, right? Elizabeth May has, frankly, the balance of power in this Parliament, maybe with one other member of Parliament, which is interesting because not only did Chuck Cadman have the balance of power, but I'm wondering now as we go into the weekend and into frankly, the break week, that members of Parliament from all the parties might be thinking of a guy named Joe Manchin, who became an independent senator from West Virginia very recently and yielded extraordinary power in the United States to get benefits for West Virginia. And he became extremely popular in his state because he had the balance of power in the U.S. Congress and the U.S. Senate. So I think a lot of members of Parliament may be wondering what kind of power they may want to have as an influence in a one-seat margin, maybe two-vote margin in this Parliament. This is a very destabilizing event for this Parliament.
Tell you what, anyone looking for a government House leader ought to hire James because I think he just crystallized the procedural point that I was raising. So thanks, James.
But it's both,
Tony, you want to weigh in too?
Just a quick point. It's both a moment for the Conservative Party in opposition, but also the Liberal Party. The same sort of math applies to the Liberal Party caucus. You have a lot of throw weight there if you want to throw your weight around now.
Yeah, very much so. Things perhaps got even more interesting.
It's happened before.
What could
something tells me we're going to be back.
What you could have is
James, last word to you.
Yeah, to Tony's point, this could destabilize in a lot of different ways, including having members of Parliament balkanize and see themselves as a regional bloc within a political party or an ideological bloc within a party. When you get down to this narrow of a margin, it destabilizes in a lot of different ways, not just red team, blue team, orange team. It also becomes very regional and very even generational. So this will have a domino effect as we go into the break week. So.
Okay, I got to leave it there. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate the discussion very much. Thanks for rolling with it. Christy Clark, Mark Medicino, James Moore, and Tony Clement. Just a few more seconds left in our program tonight to recap this breaking news on our watch. Matt Jeneroux, a member of Parliament for the Conservative Party, widely speculated to have been thinking about moving to the Liberal Party, has just announced that he will resign his seat as a member of Parliament. We will have continuing coverage and reaction throughout the rest of the evening. I'm going to leave Power Play there. I'm Vashi Kapelos. Thanks for watching.